All right, by popular demand, we are getting started early. So many people were complaining. We always start when Sunday night football ends. But I guess since it's 11:15 p.m. here on the East Coast in Jacksonville, we can officially proclaim Brock Purdy is elite a little bit before Sunday night football ends because it's going to end within the next 2 minutes. Zach Wilson just took the shotgun snap, found Brees Hall, gain of about 2 yards. The Jets are at the 20. They're down 16-12 to the Raiders in Las Vegas. So I'm keeping an eye on the TV here, and I'm talking about the 49ers. Since I started early for you, since it was such a big deal, go ahead and check out the link in the comment section. That is my article up on The Athletic. Back to being us. I talked to Fred Warner one-on-one after this game. He told me about some of the defensive disguises and the five-man front that the 49ers ran at the start, the communication with Steve Wilks. And I just expanded it into a big piece about complementary football. Speaking about that, Robert Spillane intercepted Zach Wilson. Well, it won't fully do it. The Jets still have 3 timeouts, but Zach Wilson, they trusted him one too many times with throwing the football. Raiders get the interception, and will likely win this football game. So good thing I started when I did because, well, we weren't going to hold our breaths for Zach Wilson to lead a comeback win, were we? They're showing Aaron Rodgers now on the screen just looking exasperated as hell. I'd be exasperated too if I was Aaron Rodgers. He probably would be playing better than Zach Wilson, even with a torn Achilles. This whole Wilson experiment certainly has not gone the Jets' direction. And all they need is a little bit because that defense is so good with the Jets, but Zach Wilson is leading them right to a losing record, even with a bad defense. Now, I mean, the offense, even with a good defense, the offensive line for the Jets isn't very good. But let me put something into perspective here. Here's Brock Purdy's spray chart today. Brock Purdy is about to be, I think, number 1 in QBR. We'll see how Josh Allen does tomorrow night, Monday Night Football. But the only quarterback ahead of Brock Purdy in QBR entering this weekend was Josh Allen, and Brock Purdy just put together this hell of a game. Plus 10.3% completion percentage over expectation, 296 yards. You can see the spray chart here. He had several throws that had and completions of about 20 air yards or more, including the touchdown to George Kittle, which was an MVP caliber throw. So what we're going to see here is the advanced statistics really reflect how good Brock Purdy has been. And he wasn't bad over the course of the past 2 weeks. That was a fake narrative created by people who don't understand the game. He was still playing well. It was still plus efficiency, but he just wasn't great without Trent Williams and without Deebo Samuel. And the 49ers defense was terrible, so they lost those games. But this was Brock Purdy back with a full arsenal, delivering an absolute sizzler of a game. You can go through all of the efficiency metrics, and this one probably deserves to be bigger up on the screen. This is further to the right and up is good. And look at the vertical axis. Look at how far up Brock Purdy is. That's efficiency, right? He is head and shoulders above every single quarterback in the National Football League. And the reason I bring that up right now, I just mentioned the Jets don't have a good offensive line. Purdy is doing all of this behind a struggling offensive line. He was pressured on 50% of his dropbacks against Jacksonville today. That was the highest pressure rate of Brock Purdy's career. And yet he delivered, with that extremely high pressure rate, he delivered this, which is a sensational performance, throwing to the ball to all parts of the field. It's funny because the intermediate portion of the field right here, I guess I shouldn't say all parts of the field because the intermediate portion of the field is what Jacksonville took away. This is where Purdy had his happy zone entering this game. But Brock said, okay, you guys are going to try to take this portion of the field away. Jacksonville, you're going to try to, did I say the Bengals? I didn't mean the Bengals. I meant the Jacksonville Jaguars. You're going to try to take this away? Fine. I'm just going to go to the flats. You could see he went to the flats a ton, and I'm going to beat you over the top. He found that little bubble in the zone over the top here, hit Ayuk several times, hit George Kittle with a nice pass right here, about 20 air yards downfield. And then, of course, as he was under duress, as the line was ransacking him, he somehow got the throw off. It looked like a blind throw to George Kittle and hit him in stride. I think Daryl Johnston on the broadcast said it best. This throw right here would have been a great throw from a clean pocket. The fact that Brock Purdy was able to do it from pressure and contact in the pocket, it wasn't a clean pocket, made it an absolutely elite throw. Plus 10.3% completion percentage over expectation for Brock Purdy. He is quickly morphing into one of the game's best quarterbacks. We've got over half of a season of a sample now, and Purdy was doing this last season too. So we've got a full season technically of a sample for Brock Purdy, and he's way up here in EPA per play. The Shanahan standard, a lot of people talk about this as 2016 Matt Ryan being the high watermark for Kyle Shanahan quarterbacks in the past. Brock Purdy's expected points added per play, so his efficiency per play, like Matt Ryan's in 2016, ranks number 1 in the NFL, but it's also better than Matt Ryan 2016. So we talk about Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, a much better Atlanta offensive line with Alex Mack in 2016. Brock Purdy behind a struggling offensive line is beating that standard. So, I mean, you can't say enough about Brock Purdy right now. I have a few more thoughts about him. I'm taking a quick peek. It looks like the Jets, did the Raiders throw once? The Jets didn't have to use all their timeouts. Are you kidding me? So the Jets still have one timeout left. They got the ball back. They've got 80 yards to go. So Zach Wilson gets another shot. I guess they couldn't put Aaron Rodgers in there with the Achilles. He's not in uniform right now. Oh, and Zach Wilson just threw a football into the ground. Great. 49 seconds, second down and 10. I also have to say that this goes far beyond the cerebral with Brock Purdy. So many people keep on just harping on the same incorrect, lazy narrative. Oh, he's so smart, but he's physically limited, but he's overcoming it with his brains. Yeah, of course he's smart. Of course he's making good decisions. But Brock Purdy is not physically limited. He's the opposite. He's physically advanced. I don't know how the hell this guy fell to number 262 with the physical traits he's putting on tape. But his escapability is awesome. I mean, they had to start resorting to what I thought should have been penalties to tackle him. There was that one horse collar, which wasn't called after Brock Purdy dodged like 3 or 4 pass rushers. The touchdown to Juszczyk was on the move. The touchdown to Brandon Ayuk was on the move. We're going to talk about that in a bit. 15 seconds. The Jets, they need to call their last timeout. Yeah, they finally did. Zach Wilson completed a pass over the middle of the field. They're at the 44-yard line. So they're in Hail Mary distance now. Robert Saleh got a nice looking beard going. Didn't have that with the 49ers. Show him on the sideline, but he's got to be frustrated with how this is going for his offense. Wilson that time, I mean, he made a nice play. Got hit as he threw and found the seam to Conklin, the tight end. So, 13 seconds. Jets working him back against the Raiders. So, I'm going to continue my point about Brock Purdy. His escapability is a plus asset. His escapability is better than most other NFL quarterbacks. That's what a plus asset means. But his arm strength, I think, is also clearly a plus asset. Again, if I have to show the data, I will show the data. This is the throw chart from Brock Purdy today. A heavy amount of the outside the numbers throws. So I'm talking about the completions in green over here. Those were thrown while Purdy was under pressure. Zach Wilson heaves one. Incomplete. 5 seconds to go. So we got one more play in this game. So you look at these throws outside the numbers, and you have to remember a football field is 53 1/3 yards wide. It is not easy on the arm to throw anything this wide of the numbers. Even a shorter throw that takes some mustard to complete. Purdy is completing everything to the sidelines, especially on the right side here, plus the throw to Kittle. And what he's completing is usually happening while he's been under duress. So it goes far beyond the cerebral with Brock Purdy. This guy has physically outperformed most of the NFL. And from an efficiency perspective, well, it's just been awesome for Brock Purdy. Again, we cannot put this up here enough. He is at the very top of the league. He's outperforming even what Matt Ryan did in 2016. And he was good even against Cincinnati, even against Minnesota. He just wasn't quite as good. And the main variable that changed, aside from the 49ers getting healthier offensively, is their defense played like the best unit in the league today. The 49ers defense finally delivered the way that we had grown accustomed to them delivering. And that, of course, it's a team sport. It's going to make Purdy look a lot better because he's playing downhill instead of playing uphill. I got a little bit more on this, and then on the 49ers defense, I got a lot more. But we're going to settle in here for the final Hail Mary attempt. So they're at the Raiders 44, Jets down by 4. Wilson has it, and he's going to be lucky to get a throw off here. Max Crosby's chasing him down. Wilson, wow, he did get the heave up. It's in the end zone. Oh, my God. Did Garrett Wilson get his hands on it? It looked like Garrett Wilson was playing defensive back, and he knocked that ball down. I don't know. I mean, I know I've said some critical stuff of Zach Wilson here over the past few minutes, but getting that Hail Mary throw off and getting it to the end zone, that was some impressive arm talent there. He hasn't done too much good for the Jets this year, but he gave him a chance, and I can't wait to see the replay of this. I thought that the Jets could have come down with that. A Hail Mary on Sunday Night Football. So the final is Raiders 16, Jets 12, and we now get to move on with our lives and talk more about the 49ers. But I'm really, really curious to see the replay. I don't know why it's taken them 2 minutes to show it. I don't need to see Aiden O'Connell shaking hands with everybody. I'd rather see the replay of the Hail Mary. Come on, NBC. We have some 49ers football to talk about. We got real good football teams to talk about, not the Jets and the Raiders. So somehow Wilson got away from Max Crosby. And then while he was sprinting again away from Max Crosby, he heaved it into the air. And I mean, I thought that ball was in his receiver's hands. One of the better Hail Mary throws you'll see. Well, I mean, yeah, it technically did hit Garrett Wilson in the hands, but Conklin was there as well, and a bunch of defenders. I mean, it was a free-for-all. It was as good of a shot as you'd expect a Hail Mary to have. That almost went south really quickly for the Raiders. All right, that's enough of that. Let's stop talking about Sunday Night Football. The weekend slate of games is over. We still have Monday Night Football tomorrow. The Bills will play. My prediction is that Brock Purdy will take over the number 1 spot from Josh Allen in QBR because of how well Brock Purdy played today against a very, very good Jacksonville defense. We've got to talk about the crossbody throw, though. This was the 4th 49ers offensive play of the game, and this is what Kyle Shanahan said about the touchdown to Brandon Ayuk, which everybody was like, no, bad decision. Oh, no, we're fine with that decision because it was a touchdown. Quote from Kyle Shanahan, I can say this because he played his ass off. He played well. But that was like one of the worst decisions I think he's made since he's been here. And it took me a while to get over it. I thanked him for the touchdown, but that was not a good decision. He was fortunate with it, but he made a lot of really good plays. And if you're going to make a bad decision and still touchdown in the grand scheme of things, you can tell me it was a real good decision. But he knows that. He knows what he did was wrong, but he made them right. So what we see here is Kyle Shanahan, and I think this is the correct way to coach. He's a big-time process guy. He cares more about the process than the outcome. This is reminiscent of Brock Purdy last year against the Raiders, right there at Allegiant Stadium. We just watched the end of that Sunday night game. On the touchdown to George Kittle. Remember the spectacular play where Brock Purdy rolled to his left and then flipped his hips and found George Kittle in the back of the end zone? George Kittle was the 5th eligible on the play. So Brock Purdy technically found his 5th read on the play. It looks spectacular from the viewer's angle. The only problem is that the first read on the play, Jawan Jennings, was wide open on a quick out. And Purdy, for whatever reason, didn't throw to him. So Kyle Shanahan was upset on the sideline that Purdy did not just go to where he was supposed to go with the first read and instead made the play harder than it had to be. Shanahan was actually pissed after the throw to Kittle, but then Purdy did the whole ice in my veins thing, and Shanahan just couldn't help but started cracking up. Purdy actually stared down the sideline and looked at Shanahan and was like, "You like that?" And Shanahan, he's a big process guy. He's a big procedure guy. He likes the offense run the way that he prescribes it. But Shanahan couldn't help but crack up in that game against the Raiders. And I think that was a huge moment in the maturation of Brock Purdy and the maturation of his bond with Kyle Shanahan. Because a quarterback cannot just be a robot. Kyle Shanahan schemes up there with the best of them, right? And his play caller self wants a QB to be a robot. But let's be 100% honest. This is a human game. There's human error. Sometimes the QB has to put on his Superman cape and go and make a play. The play's not always going to be great. What did they say about the defensive play calls this week? Tashawn Gibson had a great quote. He said, sometimes we have to make the bad play calls look good. Well, sometimes the QB has to make an inopportune play call effective. So Brock Purdy, by going off script, that's what he does. Now, should he have thrown across his body to Brandon Ayuk on that one play? The consensus is that probably not. But did he mitigate the risk as much as possible, even though he did make that decision? Yes. I thought that he floated that ball beyond the stretch of the defense toward the side of the bunch where only Brandon Ayuk could get it. It was a physically difficult throw to make. But that's what we've seen so far, is that this goes far beyond the cerebral with Brock Purdy. He's a physically plus quarterback. He's got above average arm strength and definitely above average escapability. And that's what people keep on getting wrong about Brock Purdy. They just stereotype him as, ooh, the last pick of the draft, not quite tall enough. He must be some kind of scrappy underdog fighting to make it with his brain. And that's just not the case at all. He is faster than Trey Lance. And I think that I'll just put it out here right now. I don't see any data to indicate, I don't see any evidence to indicate that Trey Lance has a better arm than Brock Purdy. There never was like anything on tape that would show us that. In fact, like Trey Lance was the biggest unknown of all time coming out of college. And the reason I bring up Trey Lance is because the 49ers drafted him as the prototypical ball of clay that they could mold into what Kyle Shanahan wanted from the quarterback position from both a throwing and a running standpoint. So they obviously thought that he had enough raw ability to get there, but Brock Purdy's the actual realized product of what they wanted the whole time. He's a dual threat quarterback who's above average physically and obviously awesome cerebrally, and it's all combined to create this. It's all combined to create the most efficient quarterback in the game. QBR is going to be a stat that's independent of this. This is EPA per play, where Brock Purdy's at the top. Purdy's going to be ranking ahead of Mahomes and Josh Allen in QBR tomorrow, and he's doing it all behind a struggling offensive line. Again, 50% pressure rate today was the highest pressure rate that Brock Purdy had faced in his entire career. 50% pressure rates, for context, I've been doing this for a while. I've been covering this game for a while. 50% pressure rates almost always derail quarterbacks. They have terrible games if they're pressured that often. Brock Purdy turned in a dazzling game with that high of a pressure rate, which just shows you how high of a level he's playing on. Purdy has played one bad game this year. It was against the Browns, who just beat the Ravens today, the old Browns. Remember, the Browns, when they moved from Cleveland, turned into the Ravens. And then a new expansion team named the Browns was formed. So the Browns beat the old Browns today. Anyway, that's a tangent. That one game that bad game that Purdy had against the Browns, he still drove the 49ers into position to win the game. So he's doing Brady-like stuff this year. Purdy has been high level every week, and even in the week where it wasn't as efficient, he's still got it together to put the 49ers into position to win. It's the defense that has been lagging a little bit. And as evidence of that, I'll show you this right here. These are team tiers. We take a look at this every single week, and the 49ers are alone in tier 1 again. The horizontal axis represents offense. So the further to the right, the better your offense. The 49ers have the most efficient offense in the league. You don't get to this spot if Brock Purdy has had several bad games. Purdy's only had one inefficient game, again, against Cleveland, and he still delivered in that one at the end. They're the most efficient offense in the league, ahead of Buffalo, ahead of Miami. The vertical axis is defense. You want to be further up. So the Browns, the best defense in the league. They're the only ones that have really, truly slowed Brock Purdy this season. The 49ers, before this game against Jacksonville, were down here with Buffalo and Miami. Average defense because of the big-time struggles that it had faced over the past couple weeks. This performance today, 34-3 over the Jaguars, was so good that the 49ers moved up here. They are now in a tier of their own. You could see the diagonal tier lines. You want to be way up here? They're on their way there. I think Chase Young might help them get to that spot. So the 49ers, my question is, can they go into this corner right here? If they continue playing like this, I think they could be in a corner where they are an entire tier separated from the second best team in the league. So this should illustrate why the 49ers are Super Bowl favorites, because they do both. They play offense and they play defense. And when they're clicking, when it's cohesive, those two come together for a blowout. And that's exactly what I wrote about today. So be sure to check it out. This is in the description right now. The 49ers rediscovered their complementary formula against the Jaguars, back to being us. It's a great time to subscribe to The Athletic with the 49ers playing this well. Trust me, we delve very far into it here from Jacksonville. 49ers alone in tier 1 again. You know, today, I'll tell you, it was at this moment right here that I was pretty damn sure that the 49ers were going to win the football game. Why don't we have a watch? So, you know, right here, when I'm walking out right next to the 49ers, I'm videotaping this, obviously. And when I see Chase Young, the newcomer, get in on this with Deebo Samuel, then I mean, look at the star power there. First of all, Trent Williams and Deebo Samuel both back, right? They weren't leading this in the past. Then Chase Young, the new guy, obviously also a star player, defensive rookie of the year in 2020. He's only been around for a few days, and he's in at the front of this. And I asked Chase about it after the game, and he said he's never felt a passion for the game amongst the group of guys like this. And you could feel it. Like, I mean, just watching this without the sound, you can feel the passion, the love for football from the physical enforcers of this 49ers team, Trent Williams and Deebo Samuel. And it's rubbing off on the new guy, on Chase Young. Meanwhile, Fred Warner's pumped up. He's yelling. I saw Chase Young headbutt Dre Greenlaw before this game right here. And in this, but I think that I turned the camera to it a little bit too late because I heard the headbutt. Maybe we could see it. Can we see him headbutt Dre Greenlaw here? No, it probably happened a little bit sooner than that, unfortunately. But the point is that they've integrated this guy so damn quickly. And it just let out a swagger that made it really hard to believe that the 49ers were going to lose this game. So that to me was a big time aha moment when you saw that return, because the 49ers didn't have that swagger against Cincinnati. They didn't have it before the game against Minnesota. Did they have it before Cleveland? Yes, but that's when all the injuries happened. That's when Trent got hurt. That's when Deebo Samuel got hurt. That's when Christian McCaffrey got hurt. And they were still a missed field goal away from winning the football game. So there's a reason why they're alone in tier one again. Now, I've talked a lot about the 49ers defense, and it's time to get back into why this unit showed the improvement that it did today. And I wrote about a lot of that in my complimentary formula piece. Again, that's up there in the description. But two things happened. The 49ers defense stopped the run, and the coverage disguises today were awesome. I have a crazy, crazy number right here. I think that this illustrates the football game. Take a look at this. Trevor Lawrence, his average time from snap to throw entering this game was the second fastest in the league. He was getting rid of the ball very quickly, 2.41 seconds. Versus the 49ers today, he was a full 0.3 of a second slower. .73. That's over 0.3 of a second slower. That is a huge, huge slowdown. So the only way to explain this slowdown, because Lawrence obviously would have wanted to get rid of the ball quicker today because it was such a good 49ers pass rush with so many quality bodies. The only way to explain the slowdown is because he had to hold on to the ball quicker. And if you watch the tape, hell, if you just watch the TV copy of this football game, Trevor Lawrence was confused early and often. Trevor Lawrence, I mean, he was hitching early and often. He was looking at man coverage that he thought was zone coverage. He was looking at zone coverage that he thought was man coverage. The 49ers' entire defensive game plan was built on adjustments and disguise. And for that, you've got to give Steve Wilks a heck of a lot of credit. Steve Wilks came into San Francisco as somebody who would intensify the coverage combinations on the back end. So far, as the 49ers were trying to implement those new coverage combinations, they weren't taking hold against the better quarterbacks that they faced. Kirk Cousins and Joe Burrow torched them. But the 49ers remained resolute. They said, let's keep on plowing forward. Let's make sure that we call stuff that's comfortable for our players, but let's also throw in some disguises. Yeah, why not? Why don't we roll with this? Because if we do, then we could give our pass rush more time to hit. And that's exactly what happened today. They got one of the quickest releasers in the NFL to take 2.7 to release. And that was because of the coverage combinations on the back end. Now, there was a big adjustment that the 49ers ran in the secondary. We didn't see Isaiah Oliver for more than 3 or 4 snaps today. They went smaller at nickel to Deommodore Lenoir because they needed that against Christian Kirk. Now, Lenoir didn't have a great game against Kirk. He was the best receiver for Jacksonville, had 105 yards today. But Lenoir did well enough to dissuade Lawrence from going to Kirk every single down. On other, they played a little bit of zone too, and they had downs where somebody else would naturally pick up Christian Kirk. There was a huge pass breakup early in the game from Charvarius Ward in the end zone, reaching up to knock the ball away from Christian Kirk. And then they were in zone coverage in the third quarter when Kirk was, after picking up 2 big catches to get Jacksonville into very close scoring range, Christian Kirk ran a little out pattern, and on that out pattern, Ambry Thomas picked him up in the zone, forced the fumble, ran it back 92 yards for the touchdown. They called it back because Shanahan and the 49ers were out on the field prematurely. But Ambry Thomas stepped up huge today. He was one of the adjustment players in the game because to move Deommodore Lenoir inside in place of Isaiah Oliver, somebody's got to take Deommodore Lenoir's place on the outside, and it's not going to be Isaiah Oliver. That was Ambry Thomas, and he sure manned up today. So the 49ers, with their coverage disguises, you have to tip your cap to Steve Wilks. Maybe being down on the field allowed him to communicate some of the adjustments a little bit more effectively. But the bottom line is that his game plan was money today. The game plan was money. It involved Deommodore Lenoir, not Isaiah Oliver. The game plan involved coverage disguises. It involved marrying the coverage to the rush. And boy, did the 49ers marry the coverage to the rush. Awesome, awesome stuff. Funniest quote of the day. Christian McCaffrey. I'll get more context for you up on the screen right now. Christian McCaffrey didn't break the record. He has the record, but he's going to have to start over if he wants to break it. 17 straight games with a touchdown, tied with the great Hall of Famer Lenny Moore. Christian McCaffrey, yeah, I suck. Everyone else on the team scored except for me. Womp womp. Christian McCaffrey couldn't score. They tried as hard as they could, but Christian still had a really damn good football game. If you want to look at the stats, 16 carries, 95 yards. That is 5.9 per carry. Deebo Samuel, 3 carries, 29 yards. Elijah Mitchell, 8 carries, 23 yards. He got the garbage time production for the 49ers. Brock Purdy didn't have to run today, which was nice for the 49ers because he had to run for his life a lot against Cincinnati. On the receiving side, they targeted McCaffrey 10 times. Didn't I tell you that it was going to be a big Christian McCaffrey game? Because Jacksonville ran a good bend but don't break defense. Well, they did break on the George Kittle play. But the 49ers knew they were going to have to be patient. And Brock Purdy was really patient. 10 targets for McCaffrey, 6 catches, 47 yards. Kittle, 3 catches, 116 yards. So George Kittle is having another big year. This is why you can't listen to people that don't know what they're talking about. I mean, it was, George Kittle's not being targeted enough in the pass game. Guys, calm down. You're overreacting based on 1 week. And the 1 week that people overreacted to was the Cleveland Browns game. George Kittle has since exploded. Prior to that, he exploded against the Dallas Cowboys. So it's one of those things where you take the whole body of work, you realize the NFL is a week-to-week league, and then you see what the trends are. And the trend is that George Kittle is an extremely productive receiver for the 49ers who has not been losing a step at all. And that was one hell of a throw from Brock Purdy. More statistics today. Ayuk, 3 catches, 55 yards. He remains one of the elite separators in football. Whenever they run him on those crosses, some of those slants, even when they want to run him on the out action, it seems that he's able to get a step or two on defenders. He's a man-beating wide receiver, and with man-beating wide receivers, you open up space for everybody else, even if the football isn't going in their direction. Deebo Samuel had some of his more impressive receiving action today, his pure receiving action on a couple of the out patterns today. Brock Purdy was throwing really well to the numbers. Again, this is a good graphic because it shows us exactly where Brock Purdy was throwing. And you have so many of these throws, and a couple of these on the numbers on the right where Deebo Samuel just got him in bounds. Obviously, you have the big one to Kittle. And then over the middle, he was going to Kittle and to Brandon Ayuk, followed by a ton of screens down here that I think also were effective plays for the 49ers. Speaking of screens, if there is one, point of weakness that the 49ers do need to address, it is the screen defense. I thought Trevor Lawrence saw a drive of success on the screen passes. And screens, a lot of the screens, it's just about mentality. It's just about willing yourself to tackle. I thought that, it probably was a little fluky on that one drive, although the 49ers have missed their share of tackles over the past few weeks. But Fred Warner missed a tackle. On the very next play, Dre Greenlaw missed a tackle on a screen. If both of those tackles are made or just one of those tackles are made, then the Jaguars aren't moving down the field and kicking a field goal, and this might be a shutout. Right? So sometimes you say, okay, well, what do they have to scheme better to get that screen defense set up? And I think when I watched the tape of this game, and I watched the condensed replay casually, I haven't watched the tape yet, I don't think that schematically they were all out of place. I just think that there was a couple examples of poor tackling for the 49ers. I think they tackled better than I had ever seen them tackle over the first 5 weeks of the season. And then the most recent 3 weeks entering this game were downright ugly from a tackling perspective for the 49ers, right? They were bad. They were exhausted for the Cincinnati game. They needed the bye week. They came out tackling very well, but then they got a little sloppy by drive 4 today. So if you want to nitpick what they need to improve a little bit from this win, it's going to be some of the tackling and open space because teams are going to try to screen the 49ers to death. You've got Chase Young and Nick Bosa coming off opposite edges. You have Javon Hargrave coming out the middle. Eric Armstead today got kicked in the shin. It looked like a dirty play from Brandon Scherf, but thankfully he's okay. He's pass rushing well. Javon Kinlaw played a good game today. But you've got so much power. Randy Gregory, I haven't even mentioned him. You've got so much power rotating through the front for the 49ers. The only way that these overmatched offensive lines are going to be able to beat them. And we know that Jacksonville had a bad offensive line. Remember, I told you about that? Well, the 49ers overwhelmed them to the tune of 5 sacks. The only way that you're going to be able to salvage some kind of a leg up against the 49ers is the screen game, especially if you can't run. So the 49ers, I thought in a lot of ways this was a get right game. They did stop the run. They did disguise the coverages. They forced the extra hitches from Trevor Lawrence, made him look like a totally different quarterback, sacked him 5 times, 4 takeaways for the 49ers. They have 17 now. That's number 2 in the league. I mean, awesome across the board, but you still do want to get a little bit better in the tackling of the screen game. So anyway, I think I covered everything. Why don't we move this to a 49ers Q&A? You saw me at the game, but I didn't hear you yelling at me from the railing. I'm sorry. It gets loud on the field. I tried to say hi to some people today, but thank you for saying hi. Hopefully, we can cross paths at another game soon. Sub mode on. Hell yeah. Mike has enacted sub mode. That means you have to be a subscriber to post your question. So, yeah, go ahead and be a subscriber right now. If you aren't one yet, then take care of it. Florence Lee, thank you. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you. Have a good evening, Florence. I appreciate you. I just now checked all these chats. I think the 49ers offensive line is the weakness of this team. That and the nickelback position. The thing is, they've been shuffling nickelback, right? With Diamondo Lenore, Isaiah Oliver. I think they got to set on a guy and figure it out. Last year, Jimmy Ward was a lot better at the end of the season than he was at the start of the year when they first put him in a nickelback. So it's probably going to have to be a set and forget for that position to get better. That's the rough spot on defense right now. There is no weakness along the defensive line now that Chase Young is back. The linebackers are awesome. If Ambry Thomas can play the way he did today in the outside spot when Demo's on the inside, that's not a weakness either, but that's probably still questionable. But the biggest positional weakness, like a whole group, it's got to be the offensive line. Colton McKivitz really struggled today. It's going to be interesting to see the pressure numbers when they come out tomorrow. I think John Feliciano on the left side didn't skip a beat next to Trent Williams. It's going to be interesting to see if John Feliciano continues playing for the 49ers even when Aaron Banks returns at left guard. Right? The 49ers had some center and they had some right guard issues. So the offensive line to me is still a work in progress for the 49ers. All right, I'll answer your question. Someone please tell me what Purdy did today that makes him elite. Purdy completed over 11% over expectation, which is an elite figure. Purdy overtook the number 1 spot in the NFL from Josh Allen in QBR. Purdy threw for 296 yards on only 27 attempts. Purdy led an offense to 34 points against the league's number 3 defense on the road. Purdy did everything behind a 50% pressure rate, which derails most quarterbacks. Instead, he delivered one of the best games of any NFL quarterback all season behind one of the leakiest offensive lines. Purdy made sensational throws to all levels of the field, short, intermediate, and long. Purdy hit a deep 66-yard touchdown to George Kittle, even though he probably didn't even see George Kittle because he was getting backed into the line was getting backed up into him. I think I've listed like 10 or 11 things. Did I answer your question? All right, thanks. Thanks for playing. Oh, also, no interceptions. David, do you think that the 49ers are going to need Philly to lose a couple and Detroit to lose some to get the 1 seed? Well, of course they're going to need Philly to lose a couple. Philly has 1 loss, and the 49ers have 3 losses. The 49ers obviously can inflict a loss on Philadelphia once December rolls around, but you're going to have to rely on some help. And that's what losing 3 in a row, does to you. You have to rely on some help to make up the ground. Detroit obviously won today late against the Chargers. They only have 2 losses, so the 49ers are going to need some help in that regard as well. This is a good one. Yeah, we do wonder if Samuel Womack is going to be able to help the 49ers moving forward. Because if that happens, then you could keep Diamond Lenore on the outside. Womack, it's interesting. He's seen most of his time in NFL on the outside as a reserve, but he's got the measurables to be a good nickelback. Yeah, I don't think that Fred Warner missed as many tackles today as he had the past couple weeks. I think that he was a little bit uncomfortable with some of the coverage alignments, and that's why the 49ers brought Steve Wilkes down to the field. That's why they ran their audit over the course of the bye week. They wanted to make sure that everybody was on the same page, that they were running the type of defense that fit best with the personnel. So I think that some of the missed tackles happened because the 49ers were out of position. They weren't stopping the run, so they were playing uphill defense. They're back to playing downhill defense now because they're stopping the run, and I think that Fred Warner isn't a lot better position. Did he miss a tackle on one of the screens? Yes, but I wouldn't read all too much into it. I mean, he started his career with a high missed tackle rate. He cut it down to like 3 or 4% in 2019, and I think he's going to be back down at a 6-7% guy this season. I think everything is trending in the right direction after this game. Gavin says every game Purdy has always been explosive, regardless of the situation. Yeah, I think that the only game where he wasn't explosive until the very end was the Browns game. But we saw explosiveness against Minnesota. We saw it definitely against Cincinnati. Thought he single-handedly kept the 49ers in that game as the defense was leaking oil. But today, I mean, it was off the charts. It was efficient and explosive from Brock Purdy. Winters and Brown got some snaps at the end in garbage time. They got into the game, but the 49ers were able to put reserves in the game. The first reserve in the game was Jalen Moore, gave Trent Williams a break. You know, Trent, after the game, Trent Williams told me he felt a little rusty. I just talked to him in the locker room. He's like, yeah, felt a little rusty, had to knock off the rust. Well, if that's what, rusty looks like, holy crap. He scared Darius Williams. The cornerback was running away from him. Anytime you get Trent Williams out on the left side with a full head of steam, it's trouble for opposing defenses. I thought that defensively, the 49ers ran a lot of disguise stuff on the back end. I thought that Wilkes, everybody's like simplify, simplify, simplify. I think in a way he simplified. He went back to what the 49ers did well, but he was able to mask it. He was able to show Trevor Lawrence different looks to confuse him. A great example, their first two snaps of the game were in a five-man defensive front. They haven't run many five-man defensive fronts this year, but when they have, they've been effective. They ran a five-man against Minnesota in the first drive when Charvarius Ward took the ball away from Jordan Addison, not the other way around. The first drive when Charvarius got that pick, that was off a five-man front. They ran it a couple times in Pittsburgh. I think they ran it a couple times against the New York Giants. I talked about it after that game. And they came out in the five-man front first two snaps of this game. Thought that set a tone. At first it said, you're not going to run it on us, which is the bedrock of everything. I mean, this was a top two run defense in 21 and 22. They were number 26 in run defense entering this game this season. That had to fix. So they said, we're going to fix it, God damn it. We're going to go with a five-man front. Beat us with quickness. Beat us with a throw. You're not going to run on us. So they didn't run on him. Trevor Lawrence, if he had a run called on that first play, he checked out of it. They couldn't run on the 49ers, and then they started playing games with him on the back end, making him take that extra hitch, allowed the pass rush to get home with those 5 sacks. Shanahan did go out on the field during Thomas's run back. I did see him go on the field, and I'm going to keep your question up because Mike actually sent me a screenshot of the play, and I'm going to go ahead and put it up onto the screen here. Let me just get it open for you because we have visual evidence of this happening. All right, so this is the Ambry Thomas run back. As you can see, that is Kyle Shanahan on the field at the bottom. Steve Wilkes is, I don't know if he's on the field or not, but he's very near it. You could see Jair Brown, 27, and D. Winters both clearly on the field. And right now they're like, holy crap, let me get out of the way. But ironically, Kyle Shanahan is further out onto the field than any of those guys as this play is happening. And Ambry Thomas, I mean, he's trying to pick up a full head of steam. He's cutting. You know, this was a dirty play on Trevor Lawrence's part. If you go back and watch, Trevor Lawrence runs down Ambry Thomas and dives at him well past the goal line. Like Ambry Thomas had eased up because he had scored, and Trevor Lawrence takes out his knees. Imagine if the roles were reversed. Imagine if Trevor Lawrence had finished a long touchdown run and Ambry Thomas was chasing him, and Ambry Thomas took a dive at Trevor Lawrence 5 yards past the goal line to take out Trevor Lawrence's knees. Ambry Thomas might be banned from the league right now. Nobody said anything about Trevor Lawrence taking a dirty dive at Ambry Thomas. So it's okay if it's not a quarterback getting hit. I personally, just for equitable rules across the board, I would hope that Trevor Lawrence gets fined for that hit this week. We'll see what the NFL ends up doing, though, on those grounds. Mike sending me some more stuff. Hold on. Got a couple messages here. Mike sent me another screenshot. This one, D Winters. This is hilarious. This one's good. Let me get this one up on the screen. Got to download it. There we go. So take a look at this. You could see D Winters is way out there. I got to erase the comments so everybody could see it. D Winters is way out there as Ambry Thomas is cutting, almost serving. Well, it's almost like D Winters is a defender here. Ambry Thomas is having to cut inside because his own sideline is blocking him. Steve Wilkes is on the field. Jair Brown's on the field. I don't know who the player in front of Steve Wilkes is right here. I can't read the number. I'm not going to try to guess who it is because I really can't read the number. And Kyle Shanahan is on the field as well. So funny stuff out on the sideline today from the 49ers. It didn't matter because they ended up scoring anyway. All right, more questions. 47 minutes in. Feliciano does also play center, yes. Is Philly that low in DVOA, number 21? No, he's got a chance to torch him. I think Purdy was on his way to a decent game last year before he got hurt. There were receivers running open. Talked to Deebo Samuel about that. That was a big frustration for the 49ers. But I'm not sure if Philly's ranked that low. This game is still a few weeks away, so let's pump the brakes. It's Tampa Bay next for the 49ers. Speaking of that, we should just take a big picture look at where the 49ers are relative to their coming opponents. So where the Buccaneers are right here. According to this, the Buccaneers are a higher level team than Jacksonville. Now, the thing is, Jacksonville had been hot. They were ripping off good quality football over a 5-game stretch, 5 games in a row. The defense had started to surge. The offense had started to put it together, and the 49ers just kicked them back in their place. Tampa Bay hasn't excited anybody this year, but the Fighting Baker Mayfields, they have the same efficiency profile as Seattle, which is really interesting to me. Now, the 49ers should be heavy favorites. They're going to be at home. It's going to be a first-tier team against a fourth-tier team. And then following that, the 49ers have the Seattle Seahawks, who are in the same place as the Buccaneers. It's the same back-to-back stretch that Purdy had to start his career last year. Tampa Bay, and then Seattle. Miami obviously was where he subbed in for Jimmy Garoppolo. So it's going to be fascinating. And then it's the Eagles. Now the Eagles defense, they're a little bit below average, but I don't think maybe they are number 21. This is EPA, not DVOA. But I mean, you look at these team profiles and the 49ers are clearly a cut above. Now they need to try to get that home field advantage. Do I think the O-line troubles are because of coaching or overall talent? I think Chris Foerster is a great offensive line coach. Listen, I mean, Jake Brendel was a journeyman who I think played above what you would expect from him last year. He's regressed a little bit. Spencer Burford, still a second-year guy, was a fourth-round pick out of San Antonio. He has given the 49ers some good explosiveness up front, but there have been issues with penalties and pass protection from Spencer Burford. And Colton McKivitz is Colton McKivitz. Fifth-round pick. He's going to be a lower-tier pass protector and a lower-tier run blocker. They decided not to pay Mike McGlinchey because that would have been way too much money for a low-tier pass blocker. McKivitz has actually been a better pass blocker than McGlinchey, but a worse run blocker. So there's a shortage of good offensive linemen in the league right now relative to the D-line talent. It's a problem across essentially the entire league, right? So when you look at this, you're just trying to make the most out of what you have. Just drafting a random name is probably not going to fix the issue because you got to develop the guy. He's got to fit into a very intricate system. So Trent Williams is a cheat code at left tackle. We know this. Aaron Banks had been playing well. He's out now, so John Feliciano has filled in. I think he's playing well too. But with the Williams Banks, the Williams Feliciano combo on the left side has masked a lot of the issues the 49ers have on the right, where they get into troubles when they get into straight drop back situations and a good pass rusher lines up against Colton McKivitz, or a good pass rusher comes up the A gap against Brendel, or a good pass rusher gets to work against Spencer Burford, and the quarterback is a sitting duck. That's when Brock Purdy has had to be really impressive to get away from some of this pressure. Well, you can't move Feliciano to right guard immediately because Aaron Banks is hurt at left guard. So Feliciano's got to take that left guard spot. Then you can have a conversation once Aaron Banks is back in the fold. Do you think they'll flex the Philly game in the prime time? Is that going to be in a flex window already? I think so, huh? Yeah, I think that might be a flex window later in the season. So we'll see. Who's in prime time right now in that week? That's my big question. So I guess we'll figure that out a little bit later. It is a flex window. Yeah, so I think Niners Philly can very well be a primetime game. That would start late on the East Coast. All right, it's been a really fun show. Those of you back on the West Coast still watching right now, would really appreciate it if you subscribe to The Athletic through my article. I wrote about complementary football, the 49ers firing on all cylinders again. Basically everything that we said they needed to do, they did, and it all fell into place. They've got Chase Young. They've got Randy Gregory now. So check out the description for that article. It's in there. Purdy, officially elite. It's been over half the season. He's doing stuff like this behind a sketchy offensive line. Look at that. Look at that efficiency profile up there. Brock Purdy. It's a big dot because the sample is nice and large for Brock Purdy. Better even than Matt Ryan was in 2016 right now for Shanahan. 49ers defense also good stuff today. They started the fire today. They sparked it with their stop at the start. So subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to The Athletic. Doing this show from Jacksonville at 12:08. It's already Monday morning. So I fly out tomorrow. I'll have more good stuff soon. Everybody, talk to you soon.